If there is one game more than any other that I've been looking forward to the release of in 2019, it will be Turbo Pelvis 3000's roguelike shooter, Fission Superstar X. After leaving me with an incredible impression having previewed the game last September, I was eager to get stuck in. So will it live up to the expectations that it left me with? Let's find out. Fission Superstar X is a roguelike shooter developed and published by indie developer Turbo Pelvis 3000. It released on PC and Xbox One May 21st, 2019, after having been delayed from its original release of January 31st, and is priced at $14.99 or €12.49. Fission Superstar X offers an intense and humour-filled experience that, while borrowing elements from other games, adds enough twists of its own to create an identity that is truly its own. Fission Superstar X takes place in a wacky version of the Milky Way solar system and follows the demented mission of a Dr. Leopold. While the mad scientist was working on his latest experiment, a giant nuclear bomb, he claims it spoke to him. The bomb's words being that she was called Celine and she wanted to be a superstar. Leopold decides to grant his beloved nuclear bomb Celine her wish and creates a clone of himself to pilot his bomber ship. And so you take on the role of this ship and its crew, carrying Celine across the solar system on a tour, stopping at each planet along the way. And if any of the planets do not cheer for his beloved nuclear superstar, she will detonate. Will you make it across the solar system in one piece and bring Leopold's nuclear bomb to superstardom? Or will you end up meeting your doom at the hands of fascist space cats or giant insects? Maybe you will be eaten by a hungry planetoid, or have your ship destroyed while attempting to pass through a solar flare. In the universe of Fission Superstar X, anything is possible. The plot to Fission Superstar X is minimal, but of what there is enjoyable and entertaining. The entirety of the game revolves around the solar tour of Celine, but throughout the game, as you stop at various shipyards and weapon shops and the likes, you get bits of information. Sometimes these pieces of information are based on Leopold's past, often talking about his previous abominations, or Celine's reputation after you've left a planet on the way to the next. Each and every time the information has that continual over-the-top humour to it, that the game sets out to achieve, and succeeds in doing. The plot of Fission Superstar X, while again basic, is absolutely hilarious from the moment you start the game, and it continues throughout. From its concept to its characters and species to the over-top universe that the game takes place in. Fission Superstar X offers humour at every turn that is sure to give you some chuckles. Admittedly, it isn't a form of humour that will appeal to everyone. There are times that some would likely consider it to be a little bit too far in the outrageousness. But if you're looking for a game that has plenty of humour and don't mind complete and utter ridiculousness, then Fission Superstar X will provide you with plenty of it. At its core, Fission Superstar X is part roguelite, part shoot 'em up and part strategy. The roguelite design comes from the game having permadeath, where if you die you will need to start the game over from scratch. But the light, as opposed to the like, comes from the unlocking of new ships, each with its own advantages and disadvantages, and the collecting of DNA points, which we'll go into in detail more shortly. The shoot 'em up element is the majority of the gameplay, wherein each level you need to survive for a period of time by blasting enemy ships to smithereens while avoiding receiving the same treatment yourself. And the strategy side of things comes from having to make decisions on where to go next at the end of each shooter sequence. So there is quite a complexity to its gameplay. Let's get into the nitty gritty of it. At the start of the game you will have DNA points that you can distribute to your clone's 3 stats, those stats being aim, armour and skill. Aim is the clone's accuracy when shooting, with the higher the stat the more accurate they are. Armour lowers the amount of damage the clone receives, with the higher the armour is the less damage they take. Finally is skill, which applies to the special ability of the clone. The clone plays the role of the pilot of your ship, therefore as a pilot they increase the special abilities of the other crew members and their own. The higher the level of the skill stat is, the more effective the increase of the special abilities are. The number of DNA points you have available to distribute at the start of a playthrough is depending on how far you progressed in your previous run, assuming you have yet played one. If it is your first time playing, you will be given 2 points to distribute, and if you obtain 0 points on a run, you will still have 2 points to distribute in the next playthrough. Therefore you will always have a minimum of 2 points. All DNA points obtained are one-time use only. Therefore if you have 30 points and place them all into your clone, and then are unable to obtain more during that playthrough, you will only have the default 2 points in the next playthrough. DNA points are granted to the player at the end of each playthrough. The amount they gain in a playthrough is determined by the amount of gibs they blow up throughout a run. This is done by killing organic enemies such as space whales, space cows and the likes, and then shooting the meat they drop. The amount of DNA points obtained in a playthrough is also increased with the harder the difficulty settings are. The obtaining and distribution of the DNA points is a great idea, as it gives you a little bit of an extra goal or objective when playing the game, as obtaining the DNA points and then distributing them in your clone can really give you quite an advantage at the start of a playthrough, especially with their special ability being to increase the other crew members' abilities. And with high armour and aim, it makes them not just very durable, but also extremely accurate. It allows the player to stock up points through various runs and then give themselves a good advantage as they push to complete an entire run, or maybe even challenge the game in a harder difficulty setting, ultimately increasing the overall replayability of the game. After distributing the DNA points to your clone, if any, you get to choose what ship you want to use, along with whether or not you bring an additional crew member or upgrade the pilot's blaster to a more powerful Mark II version of the standard. There is a total of 9 ships available in the game. At the start you will only have one available, which is the Bomber, a standard all-rounder ship. You unlock additional ships as you play the game by blowing up each of the planets, ultimately ending a run. Each planet unlocking a specific ship. Each of the ships have its own strengths and weaknesses. As previously mentioned, the standard ship is a great all-rounder, average in handling, armour, speed and reactor power. The second ship, which is obtained by blowing up Pluto, is a very fast ship but has low armour, while the third ship has very heavy armour but a much weaker reactor, meaning your ship has less energy and restores energy at a slower pace. The function of energy is something we'll get to shortly. Each of the 9 ships has very specific roles and apply to very different playstyles. For example, the starting Bomber is a great introductory ship, with its great balance across the board, while the second ship is suited more for experienced players who know the ins and outs of enemy tactics and are better at dodging, while the third ship is an excellent choice for players who struggle with the game's difficulty due to its heavy armour granting its massive durability compared to other ships. Overall, each of the ships is very well balanced and offer a very different gameplay experience due to their strengths and weaknesses, really adding to the overall replayability of the game. As previously mentioned, along with choosing your ship, you get to choose whether to have a second clone for a crew member or a more powerful blaster for your pilot. For an additional crew member, you get to choose between a scientist, engineer and doctor. Each crew member you have grants an additional turret to the ship, with a total of 4 turrets being possible to have at any one time. This is done by recruiting additional crew members as you progress through the game. Along with being given an additional turret, each of the crew members' roles grants a special skill, just like the pilot has the ability to increase the skill of the others. The scientist has the ability to use the ship's shield, along with the special ability to upgrade the crew armour. The engineer can repair some of the ship's health, and a doctor restores the health points of the crew if they are hurt. You can choose one of either of these, or the more powerful blaster for the pilot. The choice is yours. Having the choice of choosing a second crew member or the blaster adds a small but interesting twist to the start of a run. Choosing the blaster over an additional crew member means you have only one turret to begin with, while if you choose an additional crew member, you will have 2 weaker turrets to work with. That is until you can hire more crew members, that is. So choosing a more powerful blaster over crew members means you dish out more damage, but leaves your ship more vulnerable to being attacked on the areas of the ship that don't have turrets, until you have the money to recruit new people at recruitment centres. While if you choose to bring the scientist, it means you have a shield to block enemy attacks and have a second turret right from the beginning. It really changes things up from the start of a playthrough and adds to the overall starting options. After you're done with choosing your ship and whether you want a second crew member or a more powerful blaster, you get to choose the difficulty setting for the game. How it is done in Fission Superstar X is that there are a number of modifiers that determine the overall difficulty of a playthrough. There are 5 modifiers in total, those being ship density limiter, ship variety limiter, weapon type limiter, space hazards limiter, and finally level length limiter. By default, all these limiters are set to on, granting the playthrough the normal difficulty setting, but the more of these limiters you turn off, the higher the difficulty setting becomes. The difficulties going in the order of normal and hard difficulty to more humorous titles such as insult screaming difficulty, rage quitting difficulty, farm geek rage ranting post difficulty, and fetal position crying difficulty. How the modifiers work is that if turned off, any limitations to their category are thrown out the window. So for example, if you turn weapon types limiter off, ships can spawn with any type of weapon from the very beginning of the game, even the most powerful weapons that you wouldn't generally come up against until late game. If you turn off the ship variety limiter, much like with the weapons type, any ship type is likely to spawn at any point in the game, meaning you get tougher enemy ships much earlier than you normally would in a playthrough. Having the modifiers in various difficulty settings result in the player being able to ramp up the challenge in a very specific manner to suit their preferred playstyle, be it just in one particular way for a small ramp up in difficulty, or in every way possible to create utter chaos for those looking for a masochistic style of gameplay. The challenge is there for all forms of gamers. After all of that, your grand solo tour begins with your first level. How the combat of Fission Superstar X works is that you can only shoot enemies that are within a turret's line of sight. So for example, if an enemy is coming from behind, you will only be able to shoot it with the back turret, or if an enemy is coming from above your ship, only the upper turret will be able to shoot at it. You can of course move your ship using the WASD keys and attempt to position it in the line of sight of a turret if an enemy isn't within reach. The moving and positioning of your ship are what plays a major part in the combat of Fission Superstar X. The reason for this is that each enemy variant has a weak point, making it easier to kill them by aiming for that weakness as opposed to just attempting to shoot any random part of the ship you can. Along with that, you can target windows or turrets that, when destroyed, send the crew member of that ship into space, blowing up the turret in the process. It results in you needing to be tactical when dealing with the enemies, and figuring out their weaknesses and exploiting it, all the while making sure not to put your own ship into danger doing so. But your ship also has its weak points too. Just like with your enemies' ships, your turrets and weak points too can be exploited if you aren't careful, with enemies often having an intelligent enough AI to find and target such areas. If your crew member loses all their health, they are shot out into space and killed instantly. Depending on what crew member is killed affects the ship in a very specific way. For example, if the pilot is killed, the movement of the ship is greatly affected, making it near impossible to control. While if the scientist is killed, you will no longer be able to use the ship's shield until you find a replacement scientist. Having such weak points both in your own ship and the enemy's creates a tactical and engaging combat that, with the right strategy, can really turn the tides of battle, both in your favour and against it. While it is this that generates a lot of the game's difficulty, it is something that with patience and practice can also be used to your advantage. Because of this, every playthrough feels like progress, as each time you play the game you learn something new, be it the attack methods of a specific enemy or their weak spots, which you can then use to your advantage in the next run, making things slightly easier. This in return makes the game, which at times feels absolutely merciless, feels somewhat possible, giving you more hope and confidence with each playthrough. To help you along the way, you also have a shield at your disposal that blocks enemy projectiles and can even be used to push small enemies away from your ship if they get too close. A very useful tactic to distance yourself from ships and melee weapons like chainsaws and the like. You activate the shield by holding down the right mouse button. The longer you leave the shield active, the more of your ship's energy will be used up. If your energy bar is empty, you won't be able to use the shield or energy based turrets until it's recharged, with your energy recharging automatically over time due to the ship's reactor. So you do need to use the shield sparingly, as if you use it too much, it will leave you vulnerable both from the perspective of defense and attack, adding another layer of strategy to the game. There's a total of 64 weapons in the game, ranging from small blasters to puny rifles to Gatling blasters, rocket launchers, chainsaws, wave guns and multi-rocket launchers and more. Weapons use either the ship's energy or ammo to fire. Ammo is obtained from destroying ships and from the weapon shops, which I will go into more detail on shortly. Between the energy turrets and the shield, you need to keep a balance between your energy consumption. Having 4 energy powered turrets is extremely consuming and will quickly drain your energy, leaving you very vulnerable, while having 4 turrets that solely use ammunition will result in you quickly running out of ammo too. So keeping a balance between the two is essential for your survival, once again adding to the depth and complexity of the combat. Overall, the combat of Fission Superstar X is absolutely fantastic. It is enjoyable, engaging and extremely well executed and balanced, and the large roster of varied enemies and their weapons keep the combat feeling refreshing as new variations are constantly introduced as you progress. The combat difficulty may be a bit off-putting to some players, but the more you play the game the more you learn, and with that the game does get easier. It is a prime example of a game that's combat is easy to learn but hard to master, yet it is such an enjoyable experience, making your way from a novice to that level of mastery. At the end of each level, that being when the timer is up, you will be given the choice of choosing what crew member's skill to use. As previously mentioned, the pilot increases the effectiveness of the whole crew's special ability, the scientist increases the whole crew's armour, the engineer repairs a small amount of the ship's health, and the doctor heals a small amount of the crew member's health. You may only use one crew member's special ability per each level's end. I love this small mechanic due to its impactfulness with the overall gameplay. What makes this mechanic such a delight is the fact that it rewards the player for playing well. The reason for this is you only need to use the repair ship and heal crew abilities when receiving damage, and lots of it. Other than that, you will either increase the abilities of the crew's skills or their armour, which in return makes your life a hell of a lot easier as you progress in the game. So in a sense, the better you play it, the easier the game begins to become, especially in the earlier levels. It is such a simple mechanic, but one that can make a massive impact on the hardship you face later on, giving the player a real incentive to play to the best of their abilities. Once you've chosen what crew member's special ability to use, you get to decide your next destination, with there always being 4 to choose from. At the top of the screen you can see your progress, with the starting point being the very left of the progression bar and the very right being the end. It also shows how far you are from the next planet you are to land on. The 4 choices of destination bring you forward on the map between 1 and 3 lines, with each of them having timers of between 1 and 3 minutes. The timer being how long the next level will last before you can progress again. In some cases you will also be able to actually go backwards by 1 space on the map. This is where a lot of the strategy of the game comes into play. The reason for this is that you don't want to progress too quickly, as it will leave you weaker going into the boss fights. upgrades. The reason for this is that you don't want to progress too quickly, as it will leave you weaker going into the boss of the upcoming planet, not to mention new enemies afterwards. But at the same time, you have the Leopold police in pursuit, and you do not want them to catch up to you, especially early in the game. They have very fast and powerful ships with massive weapons that can destroy you in an instant, but it is possible for them to catch up to you where you can actually survive, but it is dangerous and isn't advised for new players, so best to avoid them. Therefore, when choosing your next destination, you need to take into consideration how much you've upgraded your ship, and making sure you don't progress too quickly, all the while ensuring you're still quick enough that the police don't catch you. But there are more dilemmas than just that to face. When it comes to deciding where to go next, do you progress by one space on the map with the level timer of 3 minutes, which will grant you more money but run the risk of receiving more damage, or do you progress by 3 spaces on the map but with a timer of only 1 or 2 minutes, resulting in gaining less money but less risk? Do you choose to go to the weapons store for new weapons, or do you go to the shipyard? You're constantly facing such choices, which become more intense and more important the further in the game you progress as the difficulty gets higher. It adds a whole new level of strategy to a game that you wouldn't think has such complexity. It really adds to the whole game, making it a much more intense and risk factor filled gameplay, and the whole experience feels so much meatier for it too. Some of the destination choices are simple continuations through space, while others allow you to stop at specific shops such as recruitment centres, weapon shops and shipyards before continuing to the next stage. Recruitment centres allow the player to hire new crew members and heal their current crew if hurt for a price, of course. Each centre has a total of 4 potential new crew members, each with their own stat levels. When it comes to their special ability, aim and armour, the higher their stats are, the more they cost, with money being obtained from defeating enemies and collecting money dropped when their ships blow up. Weapon shops grant the player the option to buy new weapons, with there being up to 4 weapons to choose from. The weapons, much like the crew members, are randomly generated at each stop, so what weapons you get is entirely random. You can also buy additional ammo at the weapon shops too. The shipyard allows the player to upgrade their ship across 4 different upgrades. Those upgrades are ship handling, armour, reactor and shield. Increasing the ship's handling increases the speed along with smoothness to handle. Armour increases its overall health points. The reactor increases the energy recharge rate, and the shield increases the power and overall length of the ship's shield. Each of the upgrades can be increased a number of times, each one costing more than the last. The shops work very well and are often well balanced with the costs versus the power and benefits of the purchases. The only one issue I would have with the shops is that the weapons in the weapon shops are entirely randomly generated, to the point where you get starting stage weapons spawning in the shops at the late stage of the game, which by that time they're completely useless. I've played more than enough roguelikes to know they are designed in a way that they will at times shit all over you like a dinosaur with a bad case of diarrhea, but having starting weapons spawn in shops in the latter half of the game seems a bit unfair. This is ever more the case due to every stop you make at that stage of the game being crucial to your survival. To stop at several weapon shops near the end to find they have the same weapons you were using about 4 bosses ago just feels unfair, but other than that the shops are very well balanced and work extremely well. At the halfway point between planets there is a mini boss fight, where you go up against one of Leopold's previous abominations. These fights can be avoided if the player wishes to do so, but the reward for beating them is more than worth the effort and risks. At the end of each of these mini bosses, as usual, you get 4 choices for your next destination, but instead of the standard, you get to choose from one of 4 special shops. These are the special recruitment, special weapons, special shipyard, and the bomb outfit shop. The special recruitment allows you to recruit more powerful crew members, along with increasing the aim of your current crew members for a price. The special shipyard allows you to upgrade your ship as the normal ones do, but also allow you to give your shield an additional ability, such as stealing money from ships or repairing your ship. The special weapon shop allows you to supercharge your weapons, giving them a mysterious extra ability that are unique to each weapon type, but it is up to you to figure out what they do and how they work for yourself. Finally is the bomb outfit shop. It is here that you get to give Celine the superstar makeover that she deserves. Each visit to the bomb outfit shop gives you a choice of 2 random costumes. Each costume type grants Celine a special ability that is activated under specific circumstances. For example, the army outfit grants you bonus ammo after multiple explosions. The scientist outfit fully recharges your energy after multiple explosions. The nurse outfit can heal your crew, and the scavenger enables you to gain money from ship scrap, and that is just to name some of them. Each of the special shops has their own specific uses that can majorly give you advantages that you otherwise wouldn't have, making the mini bosses very much a high risk, high reward scenario. As previously stated, you can indeed just move right past them, but intentionally having yourself face them is far more rewarding in the long run, adding another small yet impacting element to the strategy of how many spaces you move with each destination choice. The final thing to discuss with the choices of destinations is the environments. The The game contains a total of 20 different environments that are randomly allocated to each of the destination choices. These environments range from the nothing of deep space, to colourful space auroras, to herds of space cows and space whales, to solar flares and minefields, just to name a few. At early stages of the game, only some of the environments will be available, but the further you progress, the more begin to appear, such as solar flares, hungry planetoids and the minefields, along with some of the earlier environments having a difficulty increase. An example of this difficulty increase being the space cows, where at later stages the space cows will also be accompanied by nuclear rocket riding cowboys, or at least that's what I think they are anyhow. The environments add another layer of complexity to your decisions regarding where to go next, as some are more difficult and dangerous than others. Along with that and the help of the consistent new enemy types, they keep the game feeling refreshing, as there is always something different going on despite the gameplay never changing all that much. Without them it would really begin to feel very repetitive and monotonous. But because of the sheer number of various environments and the different scenarios they present, every level feels refreshing. Having the choices of destinations with the various timers, progression points, shops and environments creates a massively in-depth gameplay experience that makes what would otherwise be a very simple and monotonous game exciting, engaging and intense. It is a mechanic that always keeps you on your toes, constantly thinking and summing up your options and attempting to choose what is best to take given your current circumstances. Circumstances which are constantly changing, I might add. In many ways, it is this mechanic that makes Fission Superstar X, while the varied and well-designed combat is just the extra gravy on the top, and it is nothing short of being brilliant. The final thing to discuss is of course the bosses. Upon reaching a planet you will need to defeat the boss of it before being able to land and have Celine go on stage. Not that she exactly does much other than sit there and look pretty, or as pretty as a metallic nuclear bomb can. Each of the bosses is basically much bigger variations of the enemies that you've been facing up until you've reached the planet, and each is unique and has their own forms of attacks that you need to learn and avoid. One example of the boss is the massive junker and his tank, another is the naval battleship or the gigantic queen wasp that attacks you with its legs and sends her young out to get you. They're all brilliantly designed bosses, both in forms of attacks and their general design, and are well balanced in difficulty to the stage of appearance in the game, at least for the most part. Since I previewed the game last September, the first boss has had a slight redesign in the sense he now has an additional laser weapon attached to his tank. I felt the original design, which was a case of minus the laser, was difficult enough for a first time boss of the game, while the addition of the laser is maybe a step too far for new players to it. Then there is the second boss, which is far too easy, while the third boss is an absolute bastard to beat due to the foggy weather and never really knowing where he's going to move next. Not to mention his attacks are very hard to predict, making him one of the hardest bosses in the entire game. The next two bosses that then follow the foggy weather boss are pussycats in comparison. There is an imbalance between the difficulty of some of the bosses. There are times where some feel they're a bit too difficult for the point in the game they appear, while others feel they're a bit too easy. I'd go as far as to say the two mid-stage bosses of the game are by far the easiest of the lot. Apart from that imbalance, however, the bosses of the game are brilliant and continue the ridiculous and humorous theme that the game sets out to achieve from the very beginning. As a whole, the gameplay to Fission Superstar X is great. There is a huge amount of complexity to the game thanks to all the mechanics, big and small, coming together in perfect harmony. From the tactical and self-teaching combat to the large variety of environments to the in-depth and intense progression and destination system to the shops, DNA points and crew's special abilities. Everything in Fission Superstar X is there to give the game variety, complexity, intensity and most of all, a whole lot of fun. It may have a few shortcomings, such as imbalance with the bosses and the weapon shops at later stages of the game is somewhat unfair, but overall the gameplay of Fission Superstar X is a success story, and one that will keep you coming back again and again until you've mastered everything the game has to offer. The atmosphere to Fission Superstar X is absolutely brilliant. From the very beginning it is oozing with atmosphere that is perfectly fitting with both the theme and aesthetic of the game. From its main menu that has a slow, almost horror cartoon style of a track playing to fit in with the over the top and almost childish nature of Dr. Leopold. I mean, the dude puts his underpants on his head thinking it stops time, so yes, the childlike tones work perfectly for the character. Throughout the game there is that sense of fast-paced urgency, but never does the atmosphere and its soundtrack lose that over-the-top nature that the game sets out to achieve. This is only further heightened by the disco-bopping track at the recruitment centres and costume shops, along with the military notes of the weapon shop and shipyards. Every track present in Fission Superstar X is brilliantly composed to fit in where it plays, and it enhances the atmosphere greatly, not only heightening the ridiculousness of the game, but bringing the over-the-top nature to a point where it feels like you truly are in a strange and twisted version of the solar system. And overall, it just makes an already humorous and comedy-filled game even more entertaining. 2019 has so far been rather a big disappointment when it comes to games I've genuinely been looking forward to releasing. The Onimusha HD Remaster and Quest Hunter were both alright at best. Willowbrook Post was a bloody disaster, and even an interesting concept like Precipice was just a major letdown. And that isn't including others I'm yet to even make an autopsy on, so expect some more in the near future. So with so much disappointment, I really did need a bit of a boost, and thankfully Fission Superstar X gave me it. Despite the high expectations it left me with, having previewed it last September, Fission Superstar X has delivered in every possible way. From its humorous plot, to its zany characters, to its twisted and mad universe, to its complex and intense gameplay and fitting atmosphere, Fission Superstar X is brilliantly designed and executed, with only a few minor issues slowing it down very slightly. Its over-the-top nature and ridiculousness may not be to everyone's sense of humour, but for those who are looking for a challenge, a roguelike experience that is different, or just a game that does everything but take itself seriously, Fission Superstar X is absolutely worth every cent of its asking price. And with that, I give Fission Superstar X an 8 out of 10. Fission Superstar X is one of those games, like many others I cover, that has been made for the love of making a video game. A game that has been made to entertain and to, most of all, just provide a fun and enjoyable experience. It is proof that there is still a place in this industry for such games, and that not all games have to make perfect sense or be realistic to be excellent. Fission Superstar X is proof we really do need more developers like Turbo Pelvis 3000 and more games just like this.